Okay, so 2XKO's beta has been offline for about 2 weeks now at the time of recording, and as someone who was really excited to play the game, I figured it would be important to provide my own feedback and my own review of the game. I'd like to start this review by prefacing that I don't like tag fighters. The thing that really interested me in this game is the fact that you can play this with a friend in duo queue. Now, I'm sure most of you guys know me from multiverses, and in multiverses I exclusively play duos. So I'm just chomping at the bits for almost any time I can play a fighting game, but co-op. It also helps that I like the League of Legends IP a lot. I think they have a lot of interesting and creative character designs, and I hope to see them fleshed out in this game in the future. But that's enough disclaimers for now. Let's go ahead and get into the review. We're going to start off by looking at the general gameplay overview. This game is a lot more grounded than your traditional tag fighter, and I was actually pretty interested in that. As someone who leans more into the Street Fighter or Tekken side of things, this was really appealing to me. There's a lot of huge buttons in this game, but usually they end up coming with enough whiff lag to compensate for that. That allows for gameplay to be a little bit more grounded and focused more on whiff punishing, spacing, all that nonsense. By extension, air mobility is quite limited, with only 1 or 2 characters having options for air movement. This makes jump arcs committal and allows you to react and punish jump ins most of the time. This, to me, is a nice breath of fresh air whenever it comes to the tag fighter format. It's just personal opinion at this point, but I really dislike when characters are flying all over the place and move around with not that much commitment. However, this game is not shallow by any means. It's extremely deep, especially in pressure. Now, as is tradition in tag fighters, the ability to use assists makes for a lot of supposed to get hit moments, especially since you can choose to tag in and out while your assist is on screen. That is something I've always had a bit of a gripe with whenever it comes to tag fighters. That being said though, you are provided a lot of defensive options that help you get out of situations. It's definitely going to take a lot of time to know when to use what defensive option and where, but the fact that you have so many makes it so that the gameplay and pressure is always deep. There's always a lot of interaction on both player sides. The least intuitive design decision that they went with though is just how prominent chip is in this game. In most games, you can just afford to block all day and force your opponent into doing something risky to open you up. But in this game, you take a lot of damage from chip, and there's even a character who's designed to do even more damage to you on chip. I'm pretty sure the idea is to encourage people to use more of these defensive options to make gameplay a lot more interactive, as I'm sure there's a lot of frustration on aggressors' parts when someone is just blocking all day, just blocking every mix. So because chip is so strong, you're incentivized to use your large toolbox of defensive options at your disposal. All of these defensive options though have a very clear weakness with each of them and can all be called out. I understand what the developers are going for, but it's certainly not intuitive, especially to a fighting game crowd. I wouldn't necessarily call it bad, and I do think there's a lot of value in the idea, but losing simply just for blocking and playing it safe is an idea that I feel like a lot of fighting game players might take issue with. Like I said though, there is a lot of defensive options in this game, including parry, invincible backdash, burst, get up attack, push block, and some characters even have reversals on their level 1s. Needless to say, it is a very deep game. All these defensive options can also be called out pretty hard too. With parry, you can either just throw or you can just mix up your timing on offense. The invincible backdash isn't invincible to lows, so you can just throw some lows into your pressure string. Burst, of course, can be baited and you don't have it available at all times. Get up attack can be baited and blocked. Now, push block actually doesn't have that much counterplay, but it does use a bar, so your opponent does have to use some resources to get out of situations. The only complaint I really have with a lot of these defensive mechanics is sometimes it can be difficult to punish with parry. I've seen something online talking about how there's a mash parry and a perfect parry, which wasn't really explained at any point. Something about how you can punish a lot more effectively if you time the parry perfectly, and don't really get a punish if you don't time the parry perfectly. I kinda wish there was a better visual indicator for this, because a lot of the times you can't really tell. Oh, and also, I've seen a lot of complaints about push block online. Essentially, the idea is that push block is dash and forward while you're in block stun, and a lot of people have the issue of whenever they're blocking and they want to dash up and punish something, they instead push block someone and lose a meter. I can certainly see how that can be a bit of an issue, so that might need a rework on the macro. Needless to say, this game is insanely deep. There's a lot to chew on, and I think the 2XKO team knows that, and they're trying to make a deep game that will last a long time. time. The only thing I should mention though is that sometimes a deep game that incentivizes you to try new things can be a little difficult for newer players, especially since the tutorial is not great, and we'll get into that later. Moving on to assist, as you would with any tag fighter. There's a lot of variety in what assists can do, but some assists do a little too much. The primary one that comes to mind, and the one you'll see a lot of people complain about, is Ahri's. Both of Ahri's assists are huge problems, and you can't really punish either of them too well. Her back assist is the one you see the most complaints about, but the forward one's not off the hook either. Ahri's back assist is an assist that will lock down, OTG into full combos, is insanely hard to contest, and is a multi-hit, so it'll break through a lot of armor. Her forward assist is pretty nuts too, as if you're on top of someone, she can do her forward assist, cross up, and then tag for some insane mix-ups. Don't even get me started on what she can do with 2x assist or freestyle. It just creates some of those supposed to get hit moments I despise in tag fighters. Ahri's assist just creates so many situations where you can mix someone up so well that it's almost impossible to block the mix. Sure, you do have definitive answers for what you can do in each one of the strings, and there's gonna always be an option. There's no perfect option for Ahri to mix you up with, but the insane amount of free flow and freestyle that Ahri can do just makes it insanely difficult to guess correctly. Okay, I'll admit Ahri's a bit of an outlier whenever it comes to assist, but other ones are a little bit overtuned as well. Echoes in particular is a long-lasting hitbox that can be used for knockdowns as well as just a safe approach that you can't really contest. Alawi's assist will make almost any block string safe, as well as allow you to follow up with a tentacle even if you're not Alawi. And then while a tentacle is out, if a teammate grabs them, they get a full combo off of it. Now I'm not saying assists shouldn't feel strong, since there's always the chance that that's the entire duty of one other player on your team, but a large complaint you see in the community right now is regarding damage and combo length, and I feel like tuning back the assists a little bit could help, especially Ahri's. Ahri's is the biggest offender by far. Speaking of everyone hating damage and combo length, let's go ahead and talk about that. The biggest offender as far as combo lengths, and I think the one big thing they really need to change, is the fact that OTGs into full combos are way too consistent. Going back to Ahri's OTGs and leads into a full combo reset, which is just ridiculous. Solo damage is usually acceptable with the exception of Ahri and Yasuo. And once again, with both of those characters, the biggest offender whenever it comes to solo damage is the fact that they can OTG into a full combo reset too consistently. Ahri herself can OTG into a full combo with her surprise attack, but then she can also OTG with her level 1, which she can do up to 3 times in a combo. It's ridiculous how long her combos last. It's insane. Not to mention the damage, oh my god. Yasuo's isn't as bad, but I definitely have gotten annoyed with how long his combos would last, and he is no slouch in damage either. I think the biggest thing that annoys me with Yasuo is super into super. It just takes forever and does way too much damage. There's been people on Twitter with just solo Yasuo, no Fury, no teammate, no assist, no nothing. He's able to just touch of death people. And unfortunately, the worst case against the combo damage and combo length in this game is actually my favorite part of this game, duo play. The damage and combo length might not be that bad in solos, although I'm sure people still complain about it. And this is because even if one of your characters dies, you're still playing the game. You get a second chance. But in duo play, that is not the case. If it is possible to touch of death someone in this game, that means an entire person does not get to play the game for a round. And honestly, people get touch of death in this game way too consistently, especially for duos being a prominent feature of the game. Last Stand kinda helps with this situation, but you can't really do it all the time, and it's so slow that it's really rare for you to actually find good instances to do it. With most characters, that is. Continuing on with my criticism of their duo play, duos do feel fun, but they're still always going to be weaker than ones at this moment. This is just due to the flaw that in ones you're going to have full control whenever it comes to combos, mix-ups, anything like that, whereas in twos you're relying on your teammate. And in most mix-ups, you and your teammate might not be on the same page, even if you play a lot together. Fuses can help mitigate this a little bit, as having a partner control their character for the entire mix-up does help, especially in a lot of mix-up situations where you need to control two characters at once. But most of the time, just one person can grind that mix up by themselves and get it a lot more consistently than two people would. Speaking of fuses, let's go ahead and talk about those. Starting off with Pulse, I think having an auto combo thing in any of these games is always going to be nice for casual play. If I do have one complaint, it's that it can sometimes ruin your combos and you're not able to combo in the same way you would on normal controls. And because of that, if you're a casual player who learned on Pulse, it can be a little bit harder adjusting to the format. And because of that, it's really hard as a newer player to try out new routes on Pulse. Now, I'm not 100% sure about this, but if I recall correctly, Dragon Ball FighterZ had a really good auto combo system, sometimes a little bit too good, where players could just try new combos on the fly or stick with their auto combo. Moving on to 2x assist, I think that this is a great fuse. It allows for a lot more player expression through combos and routing, and it allows your duo partner to get in there and play the game for longer. Now, I will say, sometimes it gives some interesting options to characters, for better or for worse, but for the most part, I'd say it's pretty well balanced. That said though, let's go ahead and talk about Double Down. The biggest thing with this is insane damage. You can just blow people up, and easily too. And honestly, that might be a little bit of a problem due to the duo nature of the game and all that stuff. But outside of some insane damage, it also has a few other perks. For one, it's great with installs. Allowing someone to get in with their install is amazing. Installs and some other supers allow you to play pretty risky whenever it comes to using your super. On Darius, you can do DP into super and then double down to make it safe. There's also a secret benefit of the fuse as well. That being that if your teammate is on screen and you're doing your super, you can actually tag into them. This also inherently makes supers a lot safer and can make for some pretty nutty stuff with certain installs. The first one that immediately comes to mind is obviously Alawi's, however, Ahri's super is also pretty good since it can lock down people for a long time. I think my favorite thing about this fuse is that it is very easy to coordinate with your duo partner. There's nothing more simple than I'm doing a big move, you do your big move too. It's pretty well balanced for the most part, but obviously the damage is the main pain point. However, it does require a lot of resources to get that damage. Moving on to freestyle, I had some issues coordinating this with my duos. However, it's a really cool idea, but does almost everything a little too well. This allows for some crazy lockdown and mix-ups, insane damage extensions that allow you to swap to another character while a super's on screen so they can then super, effectively doing what Double Down does. I definitely expect this to be the best fuse going forward, and the only one I think is even close is 2x assist. And for the last fuse, the odd one out is the Fury fuse. I think the idea of the fuse is actually quite good, especially when the threshold is active. However, the threshold holds it back way too much, even with the extra damage. Now, it's good for clutching up certain situations, but it feels a little too single player in comparison to the other fuses. Not to mention, with how high the damage is in this game, it's very rare you're actually in the threshold and can use it. Even if this fuse was buffed to be a little bit stronger, a good player just would not allow you to enter the threshold. The game's damage is very two-touch in nature, so usually they won't put you into the threshold, they'll get you right above it and then the next combo will kill you. A good player just wouldn't overextend their combo just to avoid putting you in the threshold. But overall, I think the biggest issue with this fuse is that I really struggle to see the goal it's aiming to accomplish. Like, the idea of just doing extra damage is pretty simple and allows for players to not have to think about their fuse too much. But a dash cancel that's threshold specific seems a little too technical for that demographic. If the goal is to make a fuse for people who aren't used to tag fighters, or just don't like using assists for their extensions, maybe instead of a threshold limiting players, the downside could be higher assist cooldowns or making the dash cancel use assist cooldowns. I have more recommendations at the end of the video, so stay tuned for those, but for now, we're gonna go ahead and tackle the characters. I've already complained about Ahri a lot, but she overall is the most problematic character in my opinion. She's a hyper oppressive zoner with good mix. She's likely got the best assists in the game. If you couple that with high damage output and her great buttons, she becomes really strong. The biggest thing holding her back though is that she's got the lowest health in the game. She is exceptionally susceptible to touch of deaths or getting her assist hit hard. Now, outside of her fireball, her mid-range is kinda weak, but she can set up a lot of traps and use her assist to approach with mix. Not to mention, her multi-hit shuts down most reversals. Sorry, Darius. Overall, she's a very technical yet strong character who will almost always make any team stronger. Moving on to Braum. Braum is a big body with even bigger buttons. He has a very simple and very clear win con of strike throw. He relies a lot on this strike throw as he doesn't really have that much mix otherwise. So because of that, he can struggle to mix outside of the corner. Whenever it comes to team play though, Braum is exceptionally good in the field. He has some amazing assists, and his shield allows his teammates' assists to be even more threatening. Braum's combos are also quite easy to extend off of. Most of the time he has very clear moments where you want to tag in and extend his combos. I know that's not too important for solo play, but it's really appreciated in duo play. Now, he's likely gonna fall off as people get better and better with their defensive options, but I can see him being a very solid support character that enables his teammates better than almost anyone else. Now let's talk about Darius, my main, the guy I played. Yep, I'm that degen, I'm that guy on the ladder that you rage to. And no, I'm not sorry about doing DP super 5 times in a row. Hold that. Now in my opinion, I think that Darius is a solid fundamental based character with a lot of intuitive options to use and also play against. He has a lot of options to keep on the pressure and force the opponents to make adjustments, but his game plan is also very simple and straightforward, so it's really easy to counterplay Darius as well. Darius is Mr. Hits Big's moves right now, but I expect he'll struggle once a proper zoner comes out. Darius is one of the characters who really benefit with the fact that you're not allowed to block in this game with his bleed mechanic. Bleed is a little ridiculous right now, but I have a feeling it's going to be a lot more reasonable once people start using their defensive options a lot more consistently. Once people start push blocking Darius away or parrying his stuff, I feel like a lot of his pressure is just going to fall through. On the last couple days of the Alpha Lab, I already had a couple people who were option selecting pretty much all of my mix, just because of how many defensive options there are in this game. Now, like in League, I think he's a pub stomper, but unlike in League of Legends, I think he has potential to be solid, well balanced, and very well designed in the right hands. Oh yeah, also, Lamau, DP. He's the only character in the game that has a DP in his base kit with no setup. It's not truly invincible like other fighting games, it has 1 hit of armor, but that's enough to get out of a lot of situations. Alright, let's talk about Echo. For a majority of the beta, I had a very incorrect perception of this character. I thought he was buns, I thought he didn't have no mid-range, I thought he sucked. But once people started getting the mix down, once people started getting the hang of zoning out with his projectile and understanding that you can just kind of run behind it with very low commitment, this character went legitimately from the bottom of my tier list to the very top. Echo, like Ari, is another character where he has a lot of situations where you're just supposed to get hit. If you get knocked down by Echo, you have to guess the 4-way mix, and if he grabs you and he has an Ari on his team, guess what? You're getting OTG'd into a full combo. Now, obviously his mix is very strong, that's a very clear design direction of the character, but his zoning is really good too. You cannot afford to give this character any space or he will just zone you out with his projectile. And once he throws projectile, he's definitely gonna run behind it and you're gonna have to eat a mix or run away from him. This is because the projectile stays out for so long that if you try to contest him by hitting him, you'll actually end up hitting the projectile as well and get put into a full combo state. So needless to say, his neutral is bonkers. Now, if he does have one thing that I think is relatively weak in regards to the rest of the cast, I do think it's his damage. I mean, thank God, because I don't want to get 4-way mixed 1 time and die off of it, but still, it is noticeably a weakness over Yasuo and Ari and other characters. He works especially well with teammates that can help get him in or help capitalize off of his projectile. Like, for example, a character with a dash assist can't exactly get punished while the projectile's out. And if you take someone like Ari who can cross up and then mix up off of her assist, it gets pretty wild. I think Echo is a good contender for best in the game, but honestly, there are 2 other characters that I think might rival him. You could probably already guess by the way I talk about Ari that she's one of them, but we'll get to the other one shortly. And that other one is not Alawi. She will legit just kill you with really strong strike throw mix. Honestly, she's the closest thing in this game to a grappler, even more so than Braum. But she really doesn't have much mix outside of strike throw. And in order to really get her pressure going, she needs you to be in the corner. She has really good buttons that she can use to handle a lot of situations, but she still has to rely on reads in order to get stuff going. Tentacles themselves can be a bit difficult to utilize outside of the corner, but when they're in the corner, it's insane. It's crazy what this character can do. And the tentacles are really interactive between both Alawi and the character that she's fighting. The tentacles can serve as a constant thread of pressure that Alawi can use to reset and extend combos. So there is a genuine reason you want to try to break them as the opponent. But Alawi's buttons are really, really good at stopping people from doing that, just with how humongous they are and how good they are at whiff punishing. Overall, she's a good character, but she can struggle if she can't keep the momentum. And finally, my last contender for potentially top 1 is Yasuo. I haven't talked a ton about Yasuo, but he has a lot of the same strengths that Ahri does, and I think Ahri is amazing, with the extra added benefit that his buttons are really, really good. He's pretty good at all ranges and has an option for nearly every situation. He even has multi-hits on a lot of his normals that allow him to shut down reversals consistently. He doesn't even have the same weakness that Ahri does in terms of health. He's pretty middle of the road in the cast whenever it comes to vitality. I honestly don't know what his weakness is supposed to be. Insane mix, insane damage, insane buttons at all ranges. I don't know. I don't know where's the weakness. Even his assists provide a lot of pressure, both defensively and aggressively. Wind Wall as an assist allows for full screen multi-hitting pressure that also blocks projectiles. And then of course, forward assist crosses up for insane tag mix-ups. I genuinely think this is an insane character, and I don't think he's gonna get any worse over time. In fact, I think he's only gonna get better. Like, I'm pretty sure this is the best character in the game, but Ahri and Echo aren't too far behind. But that's my basic opinion and overview of all of the characters, so let's go ahead and get into some of the less gameplay-oriented stuff with the tutorials. You've heard it all before. Tutorials suck in this game. They leave a lot to be desired. There's only one tutorial in this game, and it effectively teaches basic movement and blocking. It doesn't even explain that most characters can run. Now, for what it's worth, it does teach you how to grab, it does teach you what your buttons do, and it even teaches you a pulse combo. But it provides no explanation for why you would want to do anything it tells you to do. There's not even an explanation about universal buttons like anti-air, sweeps, or launchers, nor any explanation of any of the game's essential defensive mechanics. I didn't even know that the red burst was you blocking a burst until many hours into the game. On top of that, since there's only one tutorial, there's no character-specific guides. I think the greatest offense that struck me as very strange is the fact that it teaches you pulse-specific combos, especially since the Magic series is in the game. I think you can teach pulse combos if there's a pulse-specific guide, but if every character in the game has a universal combo that is light, medium, heavy launcher, I think you should teach them that, especially since you can use that with any fuse. But for what it's worth, I'm pretty sure everyone can tell that this tutorial was made in like 10 minutes before the Alpha Lab launched, just so they could say they had a tutorial in the game. So I don't want to rag on it too hard, but I want to provide feedback where it's necessary. God forbid we don't talk about it and this is how it launches. I know that wouldn't be the case, but still, just in case. Moving on to matchmaking, there's actually a lot to like here. Obviously, there's no ranked queue or anything like that, but the online lobbies are very visually appealing. Effectively, you get put into a lobby and you can press a button to find a match with someone else in the lobby who is also trying to find a match. You can also walk up and spectate people. However, I don't think at the moment you can full screen the spectating. I think you have to watch it in the small screen. I'd like to hope that they're working on that, but still, I think it was important to be brought up. The coolest thing in the spectating lounge, though, is the fact that there's a big screen in the middle, and oh my god, I don't know why Street Fighter 6 doesn't do that. I thought that's what was gonna happen in Street Fighter 6, but they didn't go with it. I hope to see that this big screen gets used for other things as well though. For example, if they're having like a big tournament, maybe the big tournament matches could be shown on the big screen, and the queue below could just be replaced with a bunch of couches. That way it could be like a sense of community whenever you're watching a major. Aside from the visuals, the matchmaking is pretty interesting too. Now, the only way that you can matchmake is through these lobbies, and they use skill-based matchmaking to know what lobby to put you in. I think the biggest oversight is that these lobbies don't update until you leave. So if you're just getting smacked around by some higher elo player or beating up on some low elo player, your elo won't really be updated and you won't be fighting any better or worse players until you leave and come back. And that said though, there's no standard matchmaking and you can't matchmake from training mode, so those things are kind of annoying as well. The biggest issue I have with the matchmaking in the lobbies though is that it kind of feels like Guilty Gear floors, just less clear. Like, I'd be really curious to know what my MMR is personally. Dragon Ball usually addresses this with the little squares over your name telling you how high an elo you are usually. And like I mentioned with Guilty Gear, you just have a floor that you're on for elo. It's just something I would personally like to see, but it's not exactly necessary either. Now, I'll go ahead and admit, I don't really know how shutdowns or anything like that works for win streaks, but I would really like to see incentives be really clearly made for shutting down high win streak players. For example, you could give someone a lot of fighter currency if you shut down a high win streak player. I think there's a lot of potential there. It's really nice seeing that leaderboard, so I want to see more done with it. Speaking of things that are nice to see though, let's go ahead and talk about the UI, the visuals, and just overall aesthetics. The game is very pretty much everywhere. The avatars look good, the color customization allows for good personalization, and I'm interested to see more customization options going forward. Avatars in their own right look really good and allow for a lot of customization whenever it comes to colors. Obviously, I'd like to see more customization options in terms of clothes and stuff, but you know, it's alpha, I get it. I'm sure they plan on introducing premium avatar options, but in the case that they don't, that could be a potential avenue they might want to go down for revenue. Now, regarding the UI, the menus can be a little confusing. For one, I wish there was a dedicated store page. It's a little weird to have to go into the specific character profiles to buy their colors. Another gripe I have is that there's no invite history, so if I miss an invite, I have to ask for another one. Duoing can also cause some weird issues in private lobbies where you can't really swap up the teams. I like the concept of duos traveling together, but once they're together, they should be able to play on whatever team they want, particularly in private lobbies. I think the skins that we got are a good start, but I'd like to see more creativity in different aspects of the skin. Things like different voice lines or different round starts or ends would be really fun. Like, imagine a match start or match end screen where Darius is just dunking on someone in a Dunkmaster Darius skin. There's a lot of fun stuff that you can do with skins. And I think regular League of Legends has it right, and obviously they should go in that direction. And the last thing regarding the aesthetics that I would really like to criticize is that character themes aren't all that. Like, I'm someone who geeks out on the concept of character themes. I love them. Some of my favorite characters in fighting game history have their own theme songs that play in one way or another. Whether it's Bang and BlazBlue getting his own anime opening theme whenever he hulks out, or Phoenix Wright cornering his opponent once he's collected all the evidence and hits an objection. Even Yang and Crosstag is a huge favorite of mine because of this. I think a big reason why these feel so hype and why they're so exciting is because they're so boisterous, they're loud, they're different, they're in your face. And right now in Project L, I can't really say I remember any of the characters' themes. Like, I know that they all have their individual themes, but I can't remember for the life of me what Alawi sounds like. Echo's and maybe Darius's are the closest ones to being memorable, but in general, I would just love the character themes to be a lot more in your face and a lot more hype. But that pretty much covers everything in terms of aesthetics that I'd like to talk about. The last thing I'd like to mention before we wrap it up with a summary is the controls. And the biggest thing is that the controls are a lot for pad players. Like, it's probably fine on keyboard, stick, or hitbox, but there is so many important buttons. You got your 5 attack buttons, a dash macro, a tag button, a parry button, and it's just a lot. And don't get me wrong, I think people will get used to it, but it's definitely not a negligible adjustment. Some buttons and combinations just feel really weird on pad. It took me forever to wrap my head around the fact that grab is heavy and light, which on PlayStation is square and R1. Very different from Street Fighter and a lot of other fighting games where I'm used to hitting square and X. Burst also feels kinda unintuitive. Burst is special 2 and tag. Like, the tag part I at least get because you're using your teammate to burst you out of a combo, but special 2 is pretty much as far away on the controller as you could possibly get. Like I said, people will probably get used to it, but it's pretty unintuitive at the beginning. Okay, so I think that this is a very complex game that also aims to be beginner friendly. but I think a long list of important buttons, button combinations, important defensive options, a lack of proper tutorials or in-game explanations currently make the game pretty difficult to pick up, even for FGC veterans. The ridiculous depth of the game will make it last a long time, but I think it needs a lot of help in transitioning beginner players into competitive players. I'll just put it bluntly, combos are a bit too long, but it's particularly suspect with OTG resets. Duos, I think, are a great concept that I'd really like to see other fighting games work towards refining. But the damage output in the game, as well as the extra hurdle of cooperation, makes duos feel more like a gimmick when competing against solos. The presentation of the game is outstanding, however the UI can be a little confusing and difficult to navigate at times. I really like what they do with matchmaking, but I'd like to see more implementation for matchmaking in other areas of the game, like training mode. Character strength and design is overall really good, with only a few outliers as exceptions. Most all of them have their own unique and interesting game plans and win conditions, making it so that they all have their own reasons why you might want to consider having them on your team. But I complain a lot about this game for way too long, and it's a game that a lot of people love, so I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for it. So instead of just complaining, I'm going to provide some suggestions just for me, you know, the guy who hates tag fighters. A few suggestions from me, just as opinions that I think could help the game succeed even more than it already is. Probably the biggest thing that I would really like to see changed is just giving more strength to duos to compensate. You don't have to directly buff duos or anything, just add more features that give you more reason to play duo. For example, you could have a fuse that allows you to pick the move you use on assists. That way, some routes and executions would be near if not impossible in solos, but possible in duos. Just a little something that gives a bit more reason for why you'd want to play duos. If you wanted to be boring about it and just adjust some numbers, you could also just add scaling on solo assist combos. I think overall that'd be fine, just because it's a lot harder to successfully extend combos when you're working with a duo. And combo damage in this game really does need to be turned down, especially if you're a solo and can control both characters. Another suggestion that I have, and it's a very obvious one, but you gotta improve the tutorials. You at least need to explain all of the essential mechanics and macros in the game. Not teaching beginners about an invincible dashback, parry, or push block is a war crime. Obviously, character-specific tutorials would be really nice, but at the very least, they should replace the Pulse Fuse tutorial with a standard Magic Series tutorial. That way, beginners can feel more open-minded about trying any fuse, but then still have the Pulse Fuse there if they're worried about execution or if they just haven't had time to do the tutorial. If you wanted to teach Pulse Fuse as a tutorial, then I recommend just having specific fuse tutorials. I've said it a million billion times, but combo damage and length is a little too long, especially on OTGs. I just don't think TOD should be consistent in a tag game where a TOD means a player just doesn't get to play the game. I'm sure you can understand how that's really frustrating for one player. Now, this last one isn't a suggestion for anything they should change, but a suggestion for something I'd like to see. I think any competitive game that has a broad appeal and you're trying to get a lot of new players into it needs a for fun game mode. Specifically, a for fun game mode that secretly tries to guide players into being more and more competitive. Single player could be worth looking into for this, of course, but the big thing you have to make sure of whenever you do a single player is that it's structured to teach players real gameplay applications. Something I don't see nearly enough games do. But that is it for my 2XKO review. I know a lot of people love this game, and I'm a hater, I'm a tag fighter hater, but let me know what you guys think. The 2XKO dev team is looking for feedback, so go ahead and leave it down in the comments below, and hopefully they'll see it. But yeah, that's all I got for now. I'll see you guys in the next video.